Time for Ask the Mayor on KWBE. This week, Beatrice Mayor Stan Worth is off on other business, and we welcome in Chief of Police Bruce Lang. Good morning, Chief.
Hey, Doug. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing today?
Great.
We're a few months left, and then we all start singing Happy Trails, and you ride off into the sunset.
It'll be coming faster than I think, I believe.
What, early June is?
Early June,
date.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that's our timetable. We've started the process for advertising for a new chief, and the city's got information out there, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that just a little bit toward the end of our
Okay,
program. One thing I forgot to ask you, you've done consulting work on safety and security audits for school districts.
Correct.
Going to continue to do that? Or
Yeah, our plan is to keep that company going and maybe expand just a little bit. It's kind of depend on how it works with travel and those kind of things. School districts like to do those in the early fall. Right after school started, it kind of works best for them. So timing, see how it all goes. We've expanded somewhat here up into different size schools. Go everything from little bitty D schools all the way to A schools and Class A schools, and so everything in between. And
who'd have thought years ago schools would even have to do that? And boy, it's in a different world today with building design and entrance and exit and all those things.
Yeah, and it's a state mandated requirement actually that they have an audit done every year, and so our company's been doing it now for 20 years. And so, which is, that in and of itself is pretty crazy. But it helps kind of keep schools, give them another set of eyes to keep them on the right path to stay safe. And those schools that we've been doing for a long time, a lot of times that's just a little tweak in here and there, make sure that something hasn't been forgotten. And then some other schools where they're just getting started, believe it or not, there's schools that are just kind of getting going with school safety, so we help them kind of get the foundation set.
Right. Monday night, you presented the 2021 annual report to the City Council and Mayor, and before we went on the program here, you brought the old copy of a 1993 one, and what a change from that many years ago, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of indicative of law enforcement in general. The core work hasn't changed, and the core report here hasn't changed either. I mean, it's still talking about crimes that occurred and activity levels and so forth. Certainly, how it's handled and presented is much more modern, and the use of technology to make everybody a little more efficient is pretty evident.
I can always remember using the manual typewriter and keep making a mistake and have to go back and fix it or whatever. That was those days. I don't know how we put up with that. But,
back in my early law enforcement career, I was in the Air Force. I was a policeman in the Air Force, and I was a desk sergeant. And everything you did there was in 8 copies. And so if you made a mistake, you had to open up the form and correct each page of that form and then go back and change that T to an and now, of course, that's just like a completely foreign concept.
It's one place where computers have done their job.
Yes, it is.
Pretty nice. So anything in the 2021 report from, numbers as far as crimes and things like that, anything stand out for you this year?
Well, probably the thing that stands out this year was the number of drug arrests. That number's down, and people are often ask me, are drugs a problem in Beatrice? And my answer generally is it's the same problem in Beatrice as it is in Lincoln or Omaha or Ainsworth or Grand Island. Everybody has a certain level of drug activity, so we have our share here, and we have a dedicated drug investigator. And one of the things we found is that they kind of ebbs and flows, and when you maybe put in jail, we don't put in jail, but the system puts them in jail following our arrests, a number of drug dealers, while they're in jail, the numbers will go down, and that's kind of where we're at right now. We had a number of people that were indicted both federally and statewide for drug dealings, and so our numbers are down a little bit because of that.
What determines who goes into a federal court system and what state court system? Is it level of drugs distribution, or how does that usually? A
lot of times it's weight, amount of the drugs that they're moving. So if someone is moving large quantities of drugs, those guys are more likely to be indicted federally than someone that's moving small amounts.
On the non-drug crime side, as far as the numbers, anything else stand out there?
No, not really. Our arrest numbers are a little lower, and two factors with that. One is staff shortages. When you have less officers on the street, there's less officer-initiated stuff, such as drunk driving arrests and those things that a guy on patrol is going to run into, and then the COVID thing in general. We're still seeing a lot less movement of people and in public places and stuff because of COVID.
COVID going through it, 2 years now, 3 years now, whatever.
Seems like forever, doesn't it?
Just everybody wants it to be over with. Everybody just can't agree on the best
Right.
way to do that. But how difficult was that, just from an operational standpoint, from your department, as far as safety of officers and things like that?
Right. Well, we went from right after the pandemic was in full swing there. We had non-essential people working from home. We had officers not making routine traffic stops if they didn't have to. We had not going into homes to take routine reports, to try to do it over the phone, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. We did that early on, and I'm not 100% sure that was the right approach, only from the perspective of I think it's much worse here the last 6 months for us than it was back then. Last 6 months we've had almost, I probably guess 60-70% of our people that have had COVID in some fashion. Yeah.
When the Omicron variant and Delta variant came along, that was the big change.
Yeah, and it seems like not very many of them are really ill, just minor symptoms. So we really have not had people that are really ill. But having said that, you still have the quarantine issues and the exposure issues, and what do you do with all that? And so that's been a bit of a challenge. Just like it's not anything different for the police department than it is the factory and any place else in town.
Yeah, the staffing issue of it. I noticed that one of the things I think the governor included in his budget was an expansion of the Law Enforcement Training Academy in Grand Island. Would that make any difference, or not really? Just expand the number of people that can apply or get in, or how's that?
Well, the politically correct answer is we think it'll help.
The other answer?
What we don't know, of course, is just by building the facility bigger, if they don't fund the staffing, they're not going to be able to increase the number of people that get in, and that's what the biggest problem is. Like the last class, for example, had last I was told, 80 some applicants. They took 50, so that means 30 didn't get in. So you push them forward to the next time. If they have 80 more applicants plus that 30, now you're at 110. Still only get 50 in.
And all these departments are competing for officers.
And everybody's competing for officers and people. When this 1993 report, when we tested back then, we would have 50 to 60 people test for an opening. Now we have maybe 5.
Why is it?
Well, I think it's several things. One, there are less people working. There's my politically correct answer for that, too. How'd I do with that? There are less people working. And then on top of that, I think the mainstream media has done a somewhat disservice to law enforcement in the way that they've reported things, and makes it somewhat of a unpopular profession to go into. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of people that don't want to work weekends and holidays and that kind of thing. So you put all those things together, and then when bigger agencies are suffering just like we are, and they offer higher salaries, much better retirement, that's a big issue, and then we have to compete against those agencies for the same person, and it's hard to do that, and so you can only imagine for a smaller agency than us. The agencies, that maybe have 4, 5, 6 officers. I talked to a chief yesterday that has a small department of 9 officers, and he can't get anybody, and they're down like 5 of their 9. They were down. Mm-hmm. So everybody's struggling in the same fashion.
Would it help at all? How much might it help to, if you could, compress the amount of training time it takes to get an officer through the entire program? Would that make any difference at all, or? Just not workable, or
I don't know. LB 51 was passed, went into effect last August, and that changed dramatically for some departments what they could do, because what a lot of them would do when we talk about not getting into the academy, they would conduct their own training, and that was part of the problem, is sometimes that wasn't very good, but they would conduct their own training, and then they would put that person out to work a shift, and then they had coverage, because in places where that's really an issue, and then they would go to the academy. Well, LB 51 basically doesn't allow that to happen anymore. So we can make it work, but anybody much smaller than us really struggle to do that. And so I don't see any condensing or lowering of training. I see it going the other direction.
Before we take a break, one bit of good news. You said Monday night you're back. You've hired enough people now, but they still are some of them yet to come on duty.
Oh yeah, we're fully staffed on paper, but we still are shorthanded as far as the number of people that have completed the required training, and I have 2 in the academy, and I got 3 more to go, so it's a challenge.
All right. Beatrice Police Chief Bruce Lang with us today on Ask the Mayor, and we'll have more coming up in just a moment. Back on Ask the Mayor today with Beatrice Police Chief Bruce Lang, as Bruce is subbing for Mayor Stan Worth today on our Thursday program. Hospital Substation started that program last year. Hasn't been without, maybe a hitch or two along the way.
Well, actually, the program itself is going just fine, and the officers out there report back to me that I think the hospital staff appreciate having them there, and they have been able to take law enforcement action or help citizens at different times, which was kind of what we thought. The staffing of it, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, that's been the challenge. And so we've done some creative things. We are actually using some other agencies' officers, paying them on a off-duty basis to help staff it until we get these folks out of training and can be able to do it.
Kind of seems like a good option for a retired officer who still has the certification, isn't it?
It would be a great option for a retired officer, for sure.
So call Chief Bruce Lang.
That's right.
Interested.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. One of the changes, too, you made, one more thing on the hospital substation. How often is it that you have a situation where you really have to settle kind of a serious matter, like, say, an attempted assault on a healthcare worker or an unruly person that comes into the emergency room, that type of thing?
Oh, I'm guessing once a week.
Really?
Yeah. That would be just an offhanded guess that they ask us to help them in some fashion. You got somebody that's not cooperative, and that kind of thing.
More of just kind of diffusing the situation,
We hope so.
Yeah, but could be an arrest.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. We have not had very many of those. Mainly, it's just people that are maybe under the influence, probably the most often. Yeah. And so, as you know, people that are under the influence sometimes don't make the best decisions.
This is true. Yeah. Moving on, one of the changes made in the not too distant past was on your school resource officer program. You've had Zach Lauenstein at the high school for several years now, and Toro out there, but made a change at the middle school.
Made a change at the middle school. One of the things that we ask our school resource officers is that they stay a minimum of 2 years, and then after that, when they ask to return to road patrol, that we will facilitate that change, and we don't want someone to feel like they're trapped in a certain assignment. So that's how it went. Officer Price, who'd done a great job, said I'd like to try something different and go back to the road. And so Officer Nesbitt, who had a daughter at the middle school at the time, and got her blessing. That was important. Then she moved over into the middle school, and she's doing a really good job so far.
Don't want mom checking on what I'm doing all the time.
Well, but apparently that wasn't an issue for them, so I think that's pretty cool.
Does it take a while when, like in the case of her taking over at the middle school, does it take a while to kind of get accustomed to developing those relationships and kind of the pattern of what you do?
I think a little bit, and what we would hope is that she would develop her own patterns, just because the other guy did it a certain way. Part of the beauty of fresh ideas is she can go in there and do it in her fashion and in the way that she thinks is the most effective.
Ever since that program was started, what do you think the main benefits have been for your department? Not only that, but maybe for the schools too. What have been the most positive things about it?
Well, probably the most positive thing for us is it takes the workload off of the road patrol guys for little things that would happen in the schools. Resource officers can help with that, and so that's been a real good thing. Both the middle school and high school are pretty different in how and what we get involved in. Middle school, it's more of a caretaker function. She's there to watch kids that may be not be picked on, but is not the word I want, but might just need some support. And there's a lot of they're just getting into social media. They're just getting into
kind of verbal bullying, that type of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And also, then she's just there for those persons to come talk to. At the high school, he is a little bit more involved in keeping everybody safe, and so he's keenly aware of making sure that the safety procedures are followed, and that everybody knows what they mean and how they're interacted, and if there's a fight or something like that he's there right away to intercede in those kinds of things, and Zach does a really, really good job with that.
Yeah. Now, when I was in high school, I sure wish we had a Toro in our building. He's probably one of the most calming influences, wouldn't he be?
Yeah, he is. He's a very good dog, and we didn't know exactly how it would go with him being at the high school, but everything I've heard and everything I see about that is pretty positive.
You know, the other thing too, and I know part of it's probably security duty too, but the thing I notice a lot at various activities, sporting events, you have police there lots of times.
Right.
That's kind of nice, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's our resource guys because we do a thing where they can accumulate some time. They're rather than getting paid overtime, they accumulate that time, and then they can take that off when school's not in session.
Yeah.
So they get kind of a little bit like a teacher where they get summers off or get a lot of the summer off.
Back to COVID, how has that curtailed, if at all, some of those community event things you like to do and you like to get your officers involved in doing? Does that kind of tail off some of that for a while?
Yeah, everybody's really concerned with the special education, special needs community, and Special Olympics is what I was trying to get to. And so they've just kind of put a halt on a lot of those activities. That's been really sad for us because we were really involved with those folks, and we really miss them. And so that's probably been the biggest thing, is just that.
Great way to build relations with the community as a whole, too. I think
it is. It's a great way to build relations with the community, but it's also a great way to appreciate and understand a big part of our community that sometimes gets lost.
Kind of for the community, too, to understand that police officers are human, too.
I think so. It's funny because I have never felt like we had to get through that hurdle very much here. I always felt like the community was pretty good at understanding, that the guy in the blue suit's also, Jay Murphy that coaches my kid in baseball, or Zach who is there at the girls softball game or whatever, as a dad or a coach or whatever. And I just have not seen the barriers that a lot of places they really struggle with that, and bigger cities especially and they want to see them as people. Well, I gotta be honest with you, I think the community does a pretty good job of that already.
All right, be back to wrap up Ask the Mayor in a moment with Beatrice Police Chief Bruce Lang coming up. About 8 minutes left today on Ask the Mayor with Beatrice Police Chief Bruce Lang. Equipment needs, things like that. What's in the offing for the next year or two? I know you got to replace vehicles every once in a while.
Right.
And I tell you what, vehicles become computers with four wheels on them. It's amazing.
It's quite amazing. And where, when I just, since we're talking about a little history as well, is when I came in 1992, I said to the mayor and administrator, I said, how many officers do you normally have out on shift? And they said, well, 3 to 4. I said, oh, cool. And I said, how many patrol cars do you have? I said, 3. So quick math said, well, how do you have 4 patrol guys with 3
Doesn't
cars?
quite add up.
And so I said, we're going to have to fix that. And so we now have enough patrol cars that everybody has a patrol car to do their job with. But the patrol cars are way different. We buy a police package car, most often a Ford SUV, small SUV, and then it's got a host of different computer things in it that are all integrated together, whether it's a camera system that's in the car and the radar and the body cameras of the officers and then the computer system, and it's quite a technological deal.
Yeah. I understand once you're away, you won't have to worry about it anymore. But as far as equipment purchases, the next year or two, anything major?
No, we we had some of the CARES money, the COVID money that came out of the federal government, and so that allowed us to get really good in really good shape with equipment wise, and we're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Southeast Communications, you recently added Richardson
Yes.
County. How's that going?
Fair.
Yeah.
It's there's some learning curves there. There's been some discussion with them. We're not really sure what they want to do long term. So we're here providing the service, and we'll have to see how it all shakes out down the road. Sometimes people are more compatible than others, and we'll have to see. I don't think that whole issue is quite settled yet.
You've had a longer-term relationship with the city of Crete. How's that been working
That's
out?
been wonderful. Yeah, Crete's their city, their fire rescue departments. They're a pretty busy place, and they about as seamless a transition as you could possibly have, and so that was what we were after.
Yeah. Before I get to wrap up, maybe just a quick comment on the search process and an update there. Yesterday, and this comes up periodically, it usually comes up at a time where there's a switchover of personnel or there's an election. It's about consolidation or combining law enforcement to make more efficient. I'm sure you've heard it all before, what goes on. We've had an example to the west of us where you had a police department be disbanded and move into sheriff's department. Realistic, what are the advantages, the pitfalls?
Well, certainly there's many advantages. It's more cost effective. You don't generally save a bunch of money like people would think you would save a lot of money. You save some, but you're still going to have basically the same number of officers working. And if you had really big places where they had a lot of administration that you could pare down, you might save a little bit more. But certainly you could be more efficient with those people. We have a sergeant 24/7 supervisor, and he manages 3 to 4 officers on his shift. He could easily manage 5 or 6 officers on his shift, and if you expanded it out. So from those reasons, it would make a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense just because you have overlapping jurisdictions, and that never is very efficient. But that's kind of the way Nebraska, and most states, actually not just Nebraska, most states are set up. So getting that accomplished isn't a challenge.
Is it harder to do in a county where you have at least a fairly sizable city in it? I mean, compared to, say, like a rural county where your largest town might be 3,000-4,000 people.
Right, yeah. There's 2 or 3 models that you could pick from. One is where your sheriff, like what we saw over in Jefferson County, where your sheriff's office just absorbed the duties of the Fairbury Police Department, and the Fairbury Police Department went away. That was a fairly simple deal, and I know the city of Wymore right now is talking about what they want to do long term with their police department, because of what we talked about earlier with LB 51 makes keeping a police department of 2 or 3 people almost impossible. So they would look at that, and that's a pretty simple deal. But when you have a city that's a little bit larger than your county population, and we saw that down in Riley County, Kansas, which they did what you were just saying, like in
1974,
74, which is a long time ago. But that structure is basically just creating an entity and having a police commissioner, let's use that word for black, that would oversee the law enforcement for the entire county. And then you still have your sheriff that would do constitutional duties, keep your jail, serve papers, that kind of thing. That's a doable deal, but that's a political kind of a tough political sell. And so,
Yeah, I think that combined a couple of police departments
Yeah.
and a sheriff's office down
Right.
there, so that had some thinking really went into that. So.
Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes left, but just maybe a quick update on the search process, which in and of itself is not the easiest thing. I mean, you have to go through certain steps as far as
Right.
interviews and civil service and all kinds of things like that. Let me start out with, have you had many applicants so far?
Well, actually, those applicants go to the city administrator.
I see.
And and he's been out of town, so I'm not sure if we have any or not yet. It's not unusual that they would come in fairly. The cutoff date's the end of the month, and so I wouldn't be surprised that last week is when you're going to see most of the people apply. As far as the process, as the mayor has indicated on the show before, he kind of set up the process that he'd like to have as far as making sure the community's more involved in the selection process and council members and so forth. I think that's great. But that's not how we would do a police officer or somebody, but it's a different kind of position too. So I think it'll go fine. I'm anxious to see what kind of interest we have in the position, whether some of the things we talked about, like with police officers in general, whether that spills over into the police chief thing or not. So we'll see.
Yeah. How important is it to kind of, how would I say this, keep the politics out of selecting a police chief as much as you can? Because I can remember areas, especially in maybe some smaller communities, where somebody had a beef with the local captain or police chief, and it just led to all kinds of mayhem. How important is it to sort of keep an arm's length difference there for public safety reasons?
Well, it's important, and Nebraska has identified that as important. And in Nebraska, all first-class cities, the police chief and fire chief are civil service protected, which means that they have to be fired for cause, which means they have to have some reason other than I just don't like you. Small communities of less than 5,000 people, the new mayor comes in, he can still jettison the chief if he wants to and pick his own guy or whatever. And so what that does is that gives some security to those people, and that's how you end up with a police chief that's been there for 30 years, is that you don't have to worry about the different mayor coming in. Is he going to send me packing or whatever? As long as you're doing your job and you don't do something improper, illegal, or unethical, then you're protected.
So that's why you sought this job, huh?
That's exactly. Well, I'll be honest with you, Doug, because all police officers have civil service protection, and I would not have gone to a place where every 4 years you got to worry about whether you're going to be sent down the road and then you lose that protection. So, yeah, I'm kind of a conservative guy when it comes to that, and certainly that's an attraction. And all my cohorts that are police chiefs would all tell you the same thing, I think.
Yeah. You're pretty confident there's going to be some high-quality applicants for a job
I am.
this size? Yeah.
I am. I think we'll get. One of the things you get a little bit hung up is we don't have to have 100. We just have to have one. So we're only going to hire one. Yeah. So I think we just need to get one top-notch applicant, and that's what we're shooting for.
All right. Well, Bruce, thanks for coming in. I'm sure we'll have you in before you ride off into the sunset, as we mentioned there. So, but appreciate you coming in.
Glad to be here, Doug. Thanks.